Welcome into the Cafe Nightly Show. I'm your host, the Goldsmith. It is the 12th of February. It is a Monday. The year is 2024. And we're rolling to an end of the first cycle of our totems. And I say rolling to the end because I've got a couple cycles left of the stuff I had just started, 1.5 cycles here. Anyways, of stuff I had started at the very end or just about the very end of the start period. So I'm cruising into an end. I think a lot of other people are just about there as well. And some people have been done for a couple days because, again, we had a 5-day grace period to get things started. And then 30 days runtime. Go figure. And if you accumulate those penalties, you may have ended your first cycle a long time ago, as I did with at least one of my totems. But all that aside, it is a takeaway here of how long's our rest period. Get into a couple thoughts on that. Get into a couple things to consider when we talk about totems coming up in the next couple weeks, or what people may see in the next couple weeks with totem. But it's just a little bit of a deep breath for anybody who is at the point where their totems are expired. So we'll get into that. nflpa, we're coming to the end of the overall year season for leaderboards. For teams, we'll go back and revisit what that looks like. But realistically, we're headed towards the end of another leaderboard for the end of the year. And some people who have not participated earlier in the year, they may have opportunities to participate now, just because of the consequence and the circumstance of the teams being more evenly distributed as far as the way people were able to acquire them, people not going and purchasing specific legits or specific mementos this year as we have in years prior. So it's more of a game of trading and exchanging and people picking up for certain teams. And if a team is less heavily speculated, if there's fewer people who are trying to collect it or figure it out or build their scores there, it may be ripe for the picking for people who want to go in that direction. So we can go and touch on that. And then, of course, a couple other things that are worth noting. We are coming to a point where the gamified earnings are starting to make sense. A lot of people have, started to see some of the check marks along the way start to get made. Things like the 7-day timer. We'll get into the specifics of why some of the things look a little weird as far as whether you've got a yes or a no for completed the activity. And of course, there are plenty of people who are at 14.7% locked in for next season. So we'll say that those people pretty happy at this point. And of course, there's another month-ish to continue and complete those tasks along the way. And then otherwise, we did have a finalization, I should say, a resolve of the first ever ETH sale. I say it's a resolve because many of the properties, I should say, not any, many of the properties that didn't get bought by the people who got them reserved for them did go up, back up with the sale today. Keep in mind that some people who bought their ETH packages later in the week, some of those still have a longer lock period, so that will still continue to trickle through. But as of right now, we had a bunch of those properties hit the market today, and those did get minted out. And then otherwise, keeping our eyes out for later in the week, we do have our Monster True Mayhem cart sale, and as well as theoretically sometime thereafter the burn event or after the exchange. So we'll get into all of that. Before we do so, all views and opinions expressed by myself and mine alone shouldn't be taken as game strategy or financial advice. They are not the views and opinions of the game of the team of Upwind. Please don't take them that way. With that, we have no guest tonight, so we don't have to get too much in depth or detail about thinking about our guests here. But we'll take a look at a couple things here. And I want to take a second to pop this open in front of me. But a couple things here again, rolling the Wayback Machine out, taking a look and some reminders here at the end of the year, because we are pushed into it for our fan leaderboards. Last chance, last period, last time to do so. And again, crawling into the very end of the year. For the NFLPA. We did just see last contest just take place last week for the leaderboard contest for essentially the big game. We're getting ready for it. After the game yesterday, obviously, we do see those boards are going to get reorganized. Those who may not have been in first place, may not have been in top 10, may have rocketed themselves if they burnt the most valuable player of the game, and as according to Upland with Fire Stats, and we just still seeing that resolve come through with the leaderboards out. Otherwise, we are also looking at the last set of the team leaderboards. Keep in mind that moving around your legits, putting the right light players into the right categories for for collections may make a big difference as far as what points you're scoring, where you line up on on the leaderboards. And there's some people who are taking that to the advantage with swapping tradings, and then again optimizing of their collection. So that is something that is still open. We got a very short period of time here. I believe we've got the through the end of the weekend here to get that out. So do keep that in mind. We've got a couple other things, obviously, in the way of schedules for this week to keep in mind as well, and getting them popped up now. As we had said with the Monster Mayhem sale, obviously taking place last week. We do know that the snapshot took place today. That snapshot was anyone who was holding the Monster Mayhem or the Little Monsters map assets as of 9 to 10 a.m. today. Snapshot was taken. So you did have to be holding one of the Little Monsters or Monster Mayhem map assets between that time period if you want to potentially participate in the cart sale on Wednesday. That registration period for the cart sale is going to start tomorrow, 9 a.m. PT, the 13th. And finally can get this up here. Had to go and refresh and make things work, but finally able to get up the images here to take a quick look. So on the Monster Mayhem cart sale, we do see that it is going to be, get all the way back down where it needs to be, Wednesday the 14th, Valentine's Day. What a wonderful gift for yourself or for a loved one. You could buy them a Monster Mayhem cart. February 14th, 9 a.m. PT is the sale. 8 a.m. PT tomorrow morning, the 13th, is going to be when that sale registration starts. 24-hour sale registration between 8 a.m. and 8 a.m. the 13th to the 14th at 9 a.m. PT. The sale starts. And we expect this to be a sellout. We expect it to be relatively quick because this is one of those situations where there are fewer purchases than there are people qualified, or fewer available purchasable assets than there are people qualified. And these are going to play a role in burning to get a very exclusive, a very exciting asset, or which ends up being a truck here at the end. That's more than a cart, really. So the cart sale kicking off on Wednesday. We did go over the structure a few times, but do want to go over it just so people can make an informed decision. If you want to burn to get the truck, which we'll take a look at that truck burn as well. Here's the two trucks. If you want to burn to get this truck, you're going to be limited by the rarest of the rare of these carts. For the Monster Mayhem carts, we do see that the rarest is going to be this Noodle Fang. With a Noodle Fang, there's only going to be a whopping 10 of them available, which means there's only going to be 10 of these trucks available for burning. So if you get a cart and you get one, not good enough. You need to get all three to be able to burn through. With a price point of $35 for each of these carts. Know your budget, know your limitations, know how much of a Valentine's Day present you are going to be able to give yourself or a loved one, because you do need to be able to anticipate this is going to be $130+ investment by the time you're done. More than likely, we're going to see that nobody's going to get all three of these. Or all three of these three down the bottom, these little monster versions. There are 20 Frankensteins available. Since there's 20 Frankensteins available, there's only 20 of these trucks right here, the little monsters trucks, the tiny monsters trucks, that's actually going to be available. So you really keep that in mind. Only 30 total trucks available. $130 minimum, and more than likely, since you're going to the secondary, since it's a high level of likelihood that nobody's going to get all three, you're going to go to the secondary, and you may be paying a decent penny, pretty price to get a truck or to work towards getting one. To keep that in mind, the secondary market is going to be untethered from what the primary is, and prices can be what prices are. What I do like to put out here and keep in mind is, even though you're burning carts, which have their own utility, the carts are used for racing. It's a lower speed race than cars, and that is all they do. They're not meant for traveling between cities. Keep in mind that it's been discussed that travel is going to come this quarter, and that means moving between one city and another without using a train, or one city and another without using a plane. But it does not necessarily mean that we're going to see cars zooming around the streets of one city or another. San Francisco is not going to have cars that we can visibly see on the map moving around as we are looking around San Francisco. But what we are going to see is the potential to, skip the train, skip the plane, but still get there with my own car, waiting whatever the requisite travel period is, and potentially having a city at some point in the next quarter or two that I can only get to if I have a car. If you don't have a car, you can't get there. We could see that happening very shortly. So I do want to put out this idea that carts different than cars. In this case, you are able to burn these 3 carts right here: a ghost, a Frankenstein, a pumpkin, and get this tiny monster truck right here. If you burn these 3, 1, 2, 3, Boogle, Walk, Grumble Guts, and Noodle Fang, there's 10 available to burn all 3. If you burn all 3, 1 of each, you do get this Monsters Mayhem monster truck. Pretty cool. The key thing here is obviously the stats are a little different than this, and there is a standard truck. These are highly limited, so there's very few of these available. If you're looking for exclusivity and you're looking for something that's different than other people, this is one of those opportunities to get it. But the off-road stats are considerably better than a standard truck, so it's definitely potential to be considered and potential to even usher in off-road racing. I do want to flag that idea of off-road racing, because we are starting with this Upland series. Upland's going to start building racetracks and having official races during the 2-week cool down between seasons. We have one coming up very soon. We have a racetrack that's being built by Upland, or was built by Upland, I should say, just finished, in Qatar, in Lusail. That is something that we don't know exactly what the race dynamics are going to be there. We know that Upland's going to continue to build these racetracks. Likely there's going to be a different one each in between each season, and we're going to continue to see those get introduced. And my hypothesis is Upland's going to use one of these racetracks to help introduce the concept of off-road track. Off-road stats have been there right along. There's not going to be much value of off-road stats if we keep driving around in tarmac between cities, or if we get utility to drive inside a city. We know the roads are all tarmac, the roads are all asphalt, but that off-road stat's really going to, stand up if we do like a mud race or a race on a dirt track. So that's something I'm looking forward to Upland potentially introducing, which is why I keep that in mind as I determine if the 130 plus, and maybe much more depending on the market, 130 plus is justifiable for me. If there's enough utility for this truck for me to plan on outlaying 130, 260, maybe more. Again, we'll watch the market, see what happens there. And again, that's something to keep in mind before you buy the cart. Not a guarantee of getting the truck. Even if you get 2 of the 3, not a guarantee of getting the truck. The third, the most rare, it might not even be a matter of money. If there's 10 people who really want the truck, you may not be able to pry that third one out of their hand. If you've got 10 people who have 10 of these noodle fangs, yes, that's the rare one, right? Noodle fangs. Each one that has a noodle fang, and they really want that truck, you may not find the right price to get it out of their hands. But keep in mind, this is something that we are going to continue to see. Upland is going to continue to have these burn events, and burning from one type of asset into another in this way, upgrading your utility of your vehicle. This is the first time we're seeing it. It's interesting. Looking forward to seeing more of it potentially. This idea that maybe you have a lower class car and a lower class truck and lower class this, and maybe you collect a collection over time. You burn that collection and you get that higher class a higher class, higher performance. Maybe that's something Upland implements again in the future. A lot of people have asked about that. Could I burn 3 of the same type of car to get the higher graded car? We'll see how Upland does this long term. There's no guarantee in any of that, but this is something that is available now, with the burn not yet announced, but expected sometime shortly after the sale. With that out of the way, sale today in 3 different cities. Beverly Hills, obviously in LA, in Chicago, in Manhattan. And those are properties that are unminted. They're properties that were reserved for those who bought the Ethereum sale. And they had a week to mint. And if they didn't mint within that week, then they opened it to the public. And I will tell you that all those properties that came up seem to get sold, except for a couple in Chicago. The Chicago, like this idea of hidden gems is kind of what Upland pushed out there. But we've had hidden gems in Chicago in the past, what they did was they took the sold out city of Chicago and they put a bunch of properties in the city of Chicago in areas that some people did not really want more properties, and they sat there. They kind of took Chicago from a sold out city to a not sold out city, and they didn't fly off the market. They just sat there for a while, and that's what the additional hidden gems that Upland has brought in. Some of them did. Some of them were in collection areas. They got gobbled up. Some of them were in key areas that got gobbled up. I got my my property. One of my properties was in the Loop neighborhood. That was a exclusive. That was a good pickup. And then one of my properties was in a neighborhood, a node neighborhood. It was one of the larger properties. Is one of the few properties in a node that you're able to build a showroom on. Go figure. That's not something that I'm going to leave unminted. I happen to mint it. Go figure. So with some of those higher demand properties, obviously some interest there. Chicago's they're unminted, and of course the real story is the first time there wasn't more than a few mintable properties that were open to the public. We had a sale event in Marble Hill that was all locked. Locked by having to go through a little bit of a contest and a little bit of leveraging and a little bit of getting a randomization and having that all end up on your side, to be able to purchase at different price points. And some of those price points were significantly, or I should say all of those price points were significantly above the mint value we given. This was the first time you were able to mint in Manhattan in a very long time. Again, a significant amount of properties. We've had a couple weird unlocks over the years, but over 2 years, the first time there was more than a couple properties available to mint at mint price. So it was kind of exciting, and people did go in there today and scoop up some Manhattans. I'm surprised that people got these properties on the Ethereum bundle. They got dropped the right amount of UPIX, and they just said, I'd rather not have a Manhattan at mint. It's an interesting concept to me. It makes me question who bought these Ethereum bundles. Maybe a couple of them were people who maybe were not that new to, or were newer to Upland, were not that experienced with Upland. But it's interesting to see the number of properties that were still there in Manhattan. If you bought some properties today at mint price that you thought you would never have the opportunity to buy at mint price, congratulations. Good on you. Good for you. With these type of sales, I want to make a big note. The big note is Upland advertised this in such a way that some people assumed that we were going to be getting primarily Beverly Hills properties in the bundles, in the Ethereum bundles. That wasn't necessarily the case. It seemed like there was a lot of Chicago's. It seemed like there was some Manhattans sprinkled in. The Manhattans were kind of the icing on the cake, and then the Chicago's were kind of the base. It was kind of the starch. We had the starch layer, and maybe there was a little bit of meat sprinkled in there with these Beverly Hill properties. There was a decent amount of collections that were in there. There's some high interest properties in the Beverly Hills. It was interesting to see those. I got a couple reserved for me as well. And then you had the real adornments atop. You had the little bits and pieces of the tasty tidbits, the seasoning that made it all that much better, and that was those Manhattan properties. Like I said, I was surprised to see a couple roll over into the unreserved, available to public category today. Those did get purchased up pretty quickly, with the knowledge that there's more properties in Beverly Hills to come. Knowing that there are potentially other hidden gems in other cities, I expect to see another one of these sales, something similar that we did see the Ethereum later on. Upland did already say that Upland's not going to have a broad sale, broad minting opportunity for Beverly Hills. They're going to do more of these sales. Maybe more of them are going to be Ethereum. Maybe there's going to be a bunch of contests, but we're going to see some other bundle opportunity to get properties here in the near future. So keep your eyes out. If it's going to be an Ethereum and you don't deal in Ethereum, maybe it's not for you. But very much so, I expect to see something more along this line in the future. Keep in mind, there's more unlocks to come out over the next week or so, because they were supposed to have a week from when the Ethereum bundle was minted to when they were unlocked, with the Ethereum bundle sale continuing into the later part of last week for people to be able to scoop stuff up at that point. With that, with looking forward here, I do also want to look forward at a couple other things here. Get that out of the way. I do want to look forward at a couple other things here that are kind of on the broader or longer term roadmap for this month. We did see that we still have another month, or we know that we have another month here when we go and look at our gamified earnings. That is something that people are still, checking things off. You don't need to rush, don't need to run. But we do have a couple things like login 25 days, which nobody has reached yet because we haven't had 25 days to log in this season yet. Buy 6 props in the secondary. Maybe you trickle that through. Maybe that's something you don't race and run to do. The 5 races and 2 wins, a lot of people did that up early. If you are having a hard time winning, maybe there's some people who selectively aren't going to be the best racers, at least for a couple races. Maybe that's an option. Or maybe you just keep racing until you start winning some. Who knows? Maybe that ends up working for you. And then we've got a couple things that are also slow plays. The thing about, completing structures in 3 different cities, completing 5 different models of structures. That's something you could do in a season. It's maybe harder to do in 2 weeks. So they may have that opportunity to continue to see these roll out. But a couple things I did want to put out there as a little bit of advice for people who are still having some frustration, concern. The way some of these are keeping track or being counted are a little weird. The login 7 days straight seems to be 7 days straight that concludes with a Spark payout. So essentially, you have to start at whatever point you start, log in for 7 days consecutively, get to a Spark payout, and then after that Spark payout, 24 to 36 hours, you will see that yes check mark right here in the login 7 days straight become yes. Again, it's a weird way for that to be, counted. I was thinking it was just straight 7 days on the calendar, but it seems to be capturing from that snapshot, because that's at least what happened with me. I know a lot of other people had seen that. The login 25 days, I don't know for sure how that's going to count in or be counted. There is one thing that hasn't yet been put on that board, but will be added, and that is login for 25 days. Where are you? Apply a frost ornament to your properties for at least 3 weeks. That's 21 days. That wasn't on the list yet. Nobody's had 3 full weeks to have a frost ornament up yet. I've been have my ornaments up for frost since the beginning of frost season. So I just have to wait to get to the 21st, 22nd day of frost season, and I should probably see that pop up on my board as well. So with a lot of these, these check-ins, check-in type requirements, duration type requirements when it comes to that frost ornament, it ultimately means that it's going to take time, and you have time to get there. So I do want to put that out there. If you haven't started yet and you got 0 things checked off on the list, there's plenty of time. You can still get to the finish. You could still theoretically finish this entire list, but ultimately you don't have to. As long as you get 5, you will be getting your 14.7% earnings for the next season. If you can't get to all 5, again, it is gradated. It's stepped along the way. So you will, the more of these 12 tasks and that you can do, these 12 tests you can do, the higher the dividend you're going to get in the next season. Just keep that in mind. And it is something we've gone over a couple times. The full announcement, if you're not familiar with it yet, definitely go and take a look at the announcement. You can find it in Upwind announcements in Discord, in the game of Upwind. It's under the calendar as gameified earnings, so you can go and take a look at that. And of course, let's take a look. Let's take a very short review. And let's see where I am on this list. Again, I saw such a lag in getting information that I kind of just haven't looked at it for a bit. I would like to, have it be correct. Oh, look at that. Yay. So I got 5 points finally. My multiplier of 3s there, that's 14.7. I'm very glad to see that. What did the check come in here? Visit 5 cities, log in 7 days consecutively, win 5 races, win 2 races out of 5 total completed, and mint 3 properties. That looks like where I am. So I can take that and be happy and collect 5 standard treasures, of course, in there as well. And I can keep going down that list. I'm going to keep playing for the month, and I'm sure I will accidentally check a couple of these more off. I don't need to. I don't think I'm going to get all 12. There's a couple here that are a little funky that me getting may or may not happen. The complete 5 different models. That takes some time and some doing. I have 5 and almost 6 spark. If you have 40 spark, it might not take you as much time. It may be a lot easier. But at 5, 6 spark, you're not in a position where you're cranking structures out, of course, all the time. So that's the one that might be a little sticky for me. Ultimately, this is a first attempt on the side of Upland. So if you are having some questions on it, if it's not working out well for you, definitely feel free to shoot stuff into the Note. Get some suggestions in there. If everything works well, which again, so far it looks like it's working well. I think that most people who are relatively active in the game of Upland, who are willing to put a little bit of that time in, we'll see that 14.7% dividend on an annual basis applied to next season. And I think that we also will see some of the things that are on that list stick around into the next season. Keeping in mind, we will continue to do this. We'll continue to have the gamified earnings. Upland will change what's on the board. They may make it harder. I hope not. They make it harder to get the 14.7%. They may make it easier, and they may at some point change what that brass ring is. Maybe that brass ring is no longer 14.7%. But the theory is that instead of lowering the dividend rate for everybody, they gamified it. So some people who put the effort in get the higher earnings. Those who don't put their dividends in, don't put the effort in, I should say, to increase their dividends are going to get a standardized 14.9%. So we'll see how this runs. Again, so far so good for me. It's actual reporting. It is significantly delayed. I say that 24 to 36 hours. Keep that in mind. So if you did something yesterday and you don't see it showing up, it could just continue to be within that delay period. Don't be too surprised by that. And definitely worth highlighting here is totems. We are getting to the end. And when I say the end, I mean, I think 24 hours might be literally it. That's the latest somebody could have started 24 hours from now. Their totems and still have them active between now and tomorrow, middle end of the day tomorrow. So we have a couple takeaways to have on the totems. I'm gonna get over here, get all the way back to our totem season here. I have to go back past seasons revamped. I have to go past replica challenge. Look at us, keep going all the way back. I don't know if I'm gonna get there. We do keep a couple things in mind when we talk about our actual. Wow, I feel like I missed it. But we actually talk about our first totem cycles. That's chapter 5. That's not really my totem cycles. But when we talk about our totem cycles, we did see a couple things. First and foremost, we were learning along the way. We saw that, ultimately, we could learn as a community what the optimal feed time is. We can calculate what the optimal feed amount is by figuring out what your overall input is divided by the frequency, and then poof, there you go. That's how much you feed, how many hours. We're adding in one more complexity next feed cycle, which is going to be that there's going to be capacity introduced. That means you have to theoretically collect at certain times. The one thing that's a quandary or a question is, how does Upland set the capacity, knowing that with the feed cycles and the output cycles of some of our totems, they get a large amount of totem is what they end up outputting at the end of the cycle. The early part of the cycle, they put out almost nothing, crap throughout the month. Something like a cheetah, kind of with this little bit of a hockey stick. At the end of the month, whoop, it's going to really be outputting. So if Upland sets the amount based on, some undefined number, I could theoretically foresee that the big payments at the end of the month are too much for whatever those thresholds are. Upland has to keep that in mind. Maybe they break it up and it's not paying out all at once, and there's little incremental amounts. I don't know. Upland does have the ability to change how the functionality and the format works for this second cycle. The second thing worth keeping in mind is what people have figured out for numbers. The number of hours in each cycle, the amount to feed, the optimal amount to feed, and exactly at what points in the month or I should say cycle, not month, because not every cycle is going to be a month. But at what point in the cycle you're going to expect to see your max output? At what point in the cycle you expect to not break even with whatever you put into it? Those could all change. Upland has those up in the air; they always can. The idea that each totem has a certain place along the scale it falls. Does this one have a higher capacity than the other one? Does this one require more feeding than the other one? Those are going to stay the same, the way they're compared, the scale that they sit along. But ultimately, looking at the exact amount you're feeding and the exact number of hours in between feedings and the output, those could all be up in the air. Those could all change. Expect Upland to play with those a little bit, in that they're trying to optimize the reward structure, the amount of effort and what gets put in and what time goes in and what comes out at the end. Some would argue that they put a lot of time into their totems, and there's a few people who didn't get enough protem back from their totems to say it was successful. I will say at this point, and I can say it with a little bit of confidence, that I put a decent amount of effort in. It took me a part of the month, a part of the cycle, to realize that the penalization for being outside of that optimal feeding time is not significant. I could, feed 2 hours before my optimal feeding, 2 hours after. My alarm to get up to go to work, that's the alarm I should leave in there. I should not lose so much sleep that it's hard for me to go to work the next day. And then I still make sure I'm feeding and I don't miss feeding cycles. I go and I collect when I need to collect. Those are all what's important. And it's going to be important next cycle, but don't kill myself with it. And as long as that's what I'm doing, as long as I'm being respectful for my health and my body and what I'm doing when it comes to getting to and getting from work, then I can be profitable at this. I'm not done yet my cycle. I have a couple collections left to do. I started with just over 3,800 Protem. I did not purchase any Protem. And here I am staring at the very end of the month. I am about to cross, and it looks like I will. I'm about to cross 10,000 Protem, which puts me at the position of having made about 6,200. I expect by the time I'm done, I know I have a couple collections left. I expect to be somewhere between 65 and 6,700 upticks returned on 3,800 upticks of input, and of course plenty of effort. 3,800 was just where I started, but the concept is that I made plus or minus the equivalent of 600 upticks. 600 plus Protem, which could be equated to 600,000 plus upticks, depending on how you do your math. And I did put a lot of effort in to get there. Theoretically, next cycle starting next month, we don't know how exactly that's going to run, but we do expect it to be similar to what we've done so far. And so long as Upland doesn't change the input output too significantly, I think it's a game loop that I'm going to continue to participate in. I think that it was worth the effort up front here. Those who gave up midway, you gave up on the major payouts. Again, everything was scaled so that most of the payouts did happen towards the end. And of course, a big thing here, a big point I want to put out there is this is a game. Don't play to your ability when we talk about these game loops. Don't kill yourself. Don't wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning if it's going to affect your ability to get up and go to work the next day. And again, the penalty for feeding 2 hours early or 2 hours late didn't seem to be significant so long as you're feeding inside that feeding cycle. So play within your own lifestyle, lifespan. And ultimately, people did some interesting things. People were able to trade or sell or buy totems that are going to better fit their lifestyle. Can you feed every 12 hours? Well, maybe something like a brown that's going to give you an opportunity to feed every 12 hours. Can you live with every 8 hours? That's a tricky one because it gets into people's sleep schedules sometimes, but an orange would be 3 times a day. The interesting thing about the orange, obviously, is that you can set your 8-hour schedule if get it set right. You start at the right time. You could potentially feed right before you go to bed, feed when you get up, feed once during the day, and that works for some people. A smaller amount of input going in, with the caveat that it's more feedings overall, which means you have more potential feedings to miss, which means depending on what your penalty is, you either stop getting payout early or potentially your month earns, your cycle ends early, or you just get less payout at the end because you accumulate penalties along the way. Those are all things to keep in mind, and people can work with those and find things like, I don't know, get into a green, which is every 24 hours. And for a lot of people, that was lovely. Just get the green at the right time of day for you. You could get it right on the right on the dot. You know that you feed it at 10 o'clock at night every night before you start brushing your teeth and getting ready for bed, and more power to you. So keep all those things in mind. Those cycles may change. That's where we saw them overall. I think that since people started to build a community around totems, people started to build some thoughts and some tools around totems, keeping track of them. It is possible that if we see a significant change in the feeding cycles this time around, if we see a significant change in, how many hours in between each feeding, and now the panda feeds more often than we were used to, and something else feeds for 24 hours. Once you know that, maybe you'll be able to do some trades and exchanges to make those happen. So that's what I'm going to put out there for cycle 2 is expect some of the things to stay the same, a lot of the things to stay the same. Know we're going to add capacities, and be prepared for things to be at least a little different. Oh, that's that. On that note, I do want to remind people, I will continue to remind people until we actually get there, that travel is potentially coming for vehicles. If you haven't purchased vehicles, you may want to consider it. Again, every time we add utility to something, we have the potential for the pricing to go up. No guarantees that it will. If you own cars now, you can't necessarily take that dollar to the bank and have a direct projection of what it's going to be worth in 3 weeks because of blank happening. But it is within reason that markets can trend up if utility increases for certain things. More people may be wanting to acquire cars. So just consider that as you decide if now is a good time for you to get a car. If you do wait, and often is the case, if you do wait until the market shifts, and that means people start seeing the price go up, you may be acquiring a car at a higher price. That is something I do like to put out there, with the caveat that Upland can always add more car sales to add supply, and that there are reasons and people who will sell cars potentially below market value to try to pick up UPIX quickly to try to move into a new city or do some other activity. But we will see how that continues to evolve. But it's just a time to reflect and consider your future use case for cars, as they will be changing sometime later this quarter. Easy enough. Let's call it for the night. Thank you so much for being here. I'm hoping to get some real announcements tomorrow, some new announcements. We'll review the carts tomorrow, and and being ready for the sale on Wednesday. And we'll go over whatever else is coming up in the game of Upland. Thank you so much for being here tonight again. If you are in the plaza, or apologize, in the cafe, Discord cafe, always like to give people the heads up. Always, when we end the show, feel free to unmute your mics, be part of the conversation. And we're at that point. So Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. PT, we get things kicked off at some point, start a conversation. We get the broadcast going sometime thereafter, and we'll be back tomorrow. But for tonight, if you're in the Discord cafe, unmute your mics. The floor is open. The floor is yours.